Marcel Proust once said, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes." And I found a special person who showed me a very different perspective on vintage vehicles. Visit Charles and his unique microcar collection with me and learn more about our shared love for history, traveling, and adventures. Good morning, everyone. I am going to a very special place today, to a very special person. And actually, one of you guys, one of the followers here, has recommended this person to me. And he has a very special collection. And I hope he will show us part of the collection. And I'm super curious. I'm in a car today that I bought for my friends because it's a little bit more convenient. So sorry that you don't see me on a motorcycle. But I think we will see enough other great vehicles very soon. I was basically having a blind date that one of you guys here suggested to me. Not in a romantical sense though, but driven by a common love of vehicles and interesting stories and places to explore. And about 40 minutes from Boston, I arrived at my destination. And when Charles opened the doors of his warehouse and workshop for me, I couldn't believe my eyes. So this is the car collection of
Charles Gould and Nancy Gould.
And how many cars you have?
Oh, my therapist won't let me discuss actual numbers, but I think we think it's around about 140, and we think about 90 motorcycles. So it's quite a collection, and we've been building it for more than half a century.
That is a collection.
And our attitude is, life's too short to drive boring cars.
That's true.
I bought my first car when I was 9 years old. My dad forbid me to buy it, but I bought it anyway. I said it was my money, and he said, not as long as you live under my roof. But I brought it home, I bought it very cheap, and I got it running, and he was impressed, and he apologized.
What was it?
That was a 1937 Buick. And he was very impressed and was supportive after that. It created a complete obsession, and I've been collecting cars ever since, for more than half a century. And that's what started all of this.
When did you learn to drive when you bought your first car with 9?
I learned to drive at 9. Yeah, and the first time I drove it, I could barely even see it with the steering wheel. I had to sit on like pillows. Both of my daughters learned to drive manual transmission on a right-hand drive Mini Moke when they were 8 and 9 years old. I remember one particular day when Monique was about 14, she asked if she could take her little Honda Cub motorcycle to school. It was a 50cc motorcycle that I had bought for her. And I said, no, Monique, you can't take it. It's not registered. It's not insured. You don't have a license. You're only 14. You can't drive it to school. And she said, but Dad. And I said, what? And she said, rites of passage. And I said, excuse me? She said, rites of passage. I said, what do you mean? She said, you told me that you drove it to school when you were 14. And I said, yeah, you're right. And I gave her the keys.
Oh, no!
And she rode the motorcycle to school at 14. And all her friends were so impressed. And she got it started and rode it home after school. And she was so proud.
The collection is not only a normal car collection. It meanwhile is as well a community project. Charles doesn't work on maintaining the vehicles and making them drivable again alone. Nearly each weekend, his family and volunteers come together, visit Charles and his warehouse, and work on the vehicles. In return, drive-outs are organized and everybody is allowed to drive one of the historical vehicles.
1963, Peel Trident. This is the dashboard. This is Peel Engineering was the company. And they have 3 legs, and their slogan was Peel, almost cheaper than walking. So that's the emergency brake, the shifter, and the starter. Mm-hmm. Lights are here.
And
Horn. Directionals.
honey.
And this is the ignition switch.
Everything that you have and like 2 buttons and 2 sticks.
Right. So if you have to pay a toll or go to McDonald's drive-thru, and then you can reach out. So they only made 50 of these.
And you got hands on one of them.
Yes. And it was very much a labor of love, and I love barn finds. So we would just take rides up through Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and if I saw an old barn, I'd knock on the door and speak to the people, and if they weren't home, I often broke into the barn to see what was in there. And I love taking a car that's been stagnant for half a century and dragging it home and breathing life into it. It's like reviving a corpse that's gone, and we just bring it back. And it's a fun weekend activity. We go up to Vermont, we have lunch, we go to a hotel, and we just go looking for old cars, and we often come home with them. So it opens like an airplane cockpit because it was made by an airplane company.
How's the brand called?
Messerschmitt, the aircraft company. So after the war, they were prohibited from building aircraft because of the Reparations Act.
Yes.
And many people had lost the use of their legs because of the war. So a guy named Fritz Fend designed an invalid car for people that couldn't use their legs, and it had pedals for your hands.
Yeah.
And he was selling it to people that were disabled, but he found that shopkeepers and able-bodied people were buying it because they needed cheap transportation. So he went to Willie Messerschmitt and he said, I have more demand than I can handle, and you have an idle factory. Let's build these together. So I found an old barn in Waltham that had 7 garages behind it. It was an apartment house. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a car in there. So I peeked in every window, and there was none. So I figured it was a failure, but I got to the last window, and there was a silhouette of a car, but it had a car cover on it and boxes all over it. So I kept trying to get in. I knocked on all the doors. Nobody was home, and I couldn't get in, and I couldn't resist the hunt. It's like an archaeological dig. So I tried all the garage windows, and one was loose, and I opened it, and I went through the window, and I peeled up the cover, and that car was sitting under the cover. So I decided I would try and buy it. So I called the landlord, and he said, I don't know, I just rent the garage to this guy. And he finally gave me the phone number. And I told the guy, I love this car, would you ever consider selling it? And he said, I can't get the parts to fix the brakes, so if you want it, I would sell it. And I said, how much? And he said, well, it doesn't run, so maybe $500. And I was happy to do it and pay him a fair price. And we brought it home, and I got it running. This goes back almost 30 years. I got it running, and a gentleman offered me $3,600 for it, and I thought I had won the lottery. So I sold it, and as it went out my driveway, I said to Nancy, who I wasn't yet married to, I'm really sad, this was a big mistake, I'm going to miss that one. And then 20 years go by, and I thought I'd find another auto union. So I went on the auto union club, because now the internet was here, and I said, does anyone have one for sale? The president of the club said, there's a guy in Vermont that has one. So I called him, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm Charles Gould, and I collect old cars, and I understand you have an old auto union. Do you have one? And he said, you know I do, Charles. I bought it from you 26 years ago. And I said, oh my God, I found my old car. So I bought it back. I paid a lot more this time around. This is a great car. This is a 1949 Nash Super 600. This is an original car with original paint that's got all sorts of fading and patina and a little bit of surface rust, which just talks about how it survived for 70 years. So we love these cars. This was one of the first attempts at streamlining for American cars. And it's also, the fenders are skirted so that the front wheels can't turn very far because the fenders aren't cut out all the way. They're like the rear wheels. So the turning radius for this car is huge because the wheels can only turn a little bit. And Nash was a lower cost company, so these were often sold to salesmen. And the funny thing is that this was one of the first cars where the seats will fold down and join the rear seats to make a bed, so a salesman could sleep on the road. And the other thing is, you'll notice on all my old cars, particularly the American ones, the front side windows are regular windows, but then in front of them is a little triangular window called a vent window, and it pivots outward. And what's really interesting is At the time when you rolled the window down, if you pivoted the vent window, it would deflect the air away from the window and you wouldn't get any wind in your face, your hair wouldn't get messed up, and you wouldn't have noise. And you know from your modern car, they've eliminated those. And if you put one window down, your hair gets tossed around, the noise is horrible, and you get this buffeting sound.
Yeah.
And they made them so streamlined that the fuel economy went up, but the windows don't work. You can't go down the highway with a window open. It's just uncomfortable. And yet these old vent windows solved that problem, but nobody brings it back. This is a 1916 Mercer. So it's 106 years old. And there were two competitors, Mercer and Stutz, who would race. And Stutz would win one year and Mercer would win the other. And the owners were fiercely loyal, and there was always a rivalry. So Mercer owners used to say, you'd have to be nuts to drive a Stutz. And the Stutz owners would say, there's nothing worser than a Mercer.
I was blown away by Charles' stories and his spirit, and by the fact that his cars were not treated like museum pieces, but like vehicles to be used and to be enjoyed. So I got closer to historical cars and vehicles that I otherwise only knew from museums or untouchable car collections than ever in my life before. The second thing I was amazed of was that Charles' focus for his collection is not the popular car models that everyone is looking for, but especially the so-called microcars, or cars that were used widely for people working, and that therefore never got a real luxury old-timer status or became collector's pieces.
So we've been collecting for years, but my philosophy about collecting is very different than many museums or many collectors. And the reason being that I really like pedestrian cars that nobody appreciated, so I don't chase the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris. I chase the Nashes and the Saabs and the Fiats. And at one time, nobody cared or appreciated or wanted to preserve them, but because so few were preserved, now they're rare and you don't see them. And I really like them because they were cars that anyone could attain. You didn't have to be wealthy to get a Fiat. You did to get a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
The other thing is that everybody restores cars so they're better than new. They're flawless. And that's not my philosophy. My philosophy is if a car has survived for 50 or 60 years, you should preserve it, and that you would never repaint an antique furniture or an antique painting. You would destroy its value. So I don't know why we make cars restored to better than new. We actually do destroy all the history.
That's true.
So every nick and dent and scratch tells another chapter of its half century of survival, and I want to preserve that.
You guys know me. Even though I of course couldn't contribute with any mechanical skills, I was allowed to see some of Charles' beloved vehicles in action and to get a feeling for what traveling in an old-timer could really mean.
The Fiat?
Yes.
What is this? Is this a 500? No, this is a Panda?
It is a 500. It's called, it is a Cinquecento, but it's called a Giardiniera, which means the gardener's wagon. So it's a station wagon. So they lie the motor down on its side so they can make it like a station wagon.
And the doors are very interesting. I just see it. They open up.
They're called suicide doors when they open backwards.
Why are they called like this?
Because if you open them at speed, the wind will tear them right off the car.
So we are now in our Fiat.
Yep.
And the best thing about it, the open sky above us.
Yep. And we're going camping. So we have our caravan with us.
Exactly. This is so cool. So of course we go in a car. It's very good German engineering.
Of course, of course.
A good old Volkswagen bus.
Yep, 1972.
1972.
And it's called the Camp Mobile, which is the weekender version. Mini Cooper, and this is a Cooper Special.
Smooth.
Yeah.
This is the third car, and that's the nice Mini.
Yes, this one's a 1990 Mini Cooper S.
So fast! But Charles is driving like a madman.
I am a madman. I'm driving like Charles. These are Alfa Romeo, Italian of course.
now I'm gonna drive this car and Charles dares to drive next to me.
I may want to call my insurance company first.
Oh my god.
Here we go. Oh, you're a natural.
I'm a natural.
You're going to do fine in this.
The collection actually consists of 2 parts and 2 warehouses. In one, Charles keeps the vehicles that he is currently working on and that are more or less drivable. The other one is a place of future projects. Vehicles waiting to be woken up from decades or even a century of hibernation.
One of the first stories I had when I was 14 is a family friend knew that I loved Jeeps, and he told me about the Army surplus Jeeps that went to auction. And he said that they sell for $100 or $200. And he gave me the catalog, and I looked at the catalog, and all the bidding sheets never asked for a date of birth or your age. So I filled out all the bidding sheets hoping I would get one Jeep, and I figured I could save $200. I could pay for a Jeep. So I sent all these auction sheets in. It was long before the internet. And about 6 weeks later, I got an envelope from the Government Services Administration announcing that I had won a Jeep for $180. And I was thrilled that I was making plans about how I would get it home because I didn't even have a license. And then 2 days later, I got 3 more envelopes. And it never occurred to me that I could win more than one Jeep, but I had won 3 more. And 7 days later, I got several more envelopes and then more for the following 3 weeks. And it turns out I won 16 of the auctions. And the total was over $4,000, which I did not have. So I went to my dad with kind of sheepishly and told him that I made a big mistake, and he was really mad at me. But to his credit, he was brilliant. He brought me down to his bank. He introduced me to his banker, and he said, my son made a commitment to buy 16 damn Jeeps. And he said, I'm going to teach him that he has to honor that commitment. So he co-signed a loan for me. And he said, and he's going to sell every goddamn Jeep until that loan is paid. And if there's any left over, he can keep them. So I did. And I sold 8 Jeeps and paid the loan. And I had 6 left over. So I was able to play with them. ESA, 650 Lightning, a matchless G80, a BSA. This is also a Lightning, but later. Actually, the first one's a Thunderbolt. This one's a Lightning. This is a Norton Commando. This is another Suzuki Wankel. This is a beautiful 1950 Norton ES1.
Is that running?
Yes.
That's really beautiful bike.
Here's Leah driving her 1916 Ford Model T. To drive this car is very unusual. This is your throttle, so you do it with your hand. Okay? Mm-hmm. The other one is adjust the spark. So if you're climbing a hill, you have to retard the spark. And then if you look at the pedals, the one on the left is your transmission shifter. So you throttle with your hand and you shift with your foot like a motorcycle. So all the way down is low gear, halfway up is neutral, all the way up is high.
Okay, so you only have low and high.
Right, it's just 2 speed. Right. It's called a planetary transmission, and it's the predecessor of the automatic transmission way back in 1960.
Nice. Yeah. I have never been sitting inside such an old vehicle. I have only seen them in museums.
Isn't it wonderful?
How cool is that? And now I'm following Charles here, who is driving in front of me with a nice Alfa Romeo. And we're going now to the museum.
After spending hours and hours with Charles at his microcar collection, we decided to visit another place together before saying goodbye. So I followed him through the lovely roads of Massachusetts. Him in his beautiful Alfa Romeo, me in what now felt like a pretty normal VW Golf of my friends. Our last stop was the iconic motorcycle store Cycles 128 in Beverly, Massachusetts, and the Cycles Classic Cafe Museum in the upper floor of the building.
Vincent was made in England in the late 40s and early 50s. I mean, they made them long before that, but these are notoriously the holy grail of vintage motorcycles. But it was the original superbike. So it's a huge motor, 1,000 cc, very high compression, very hard to start. And they were just incredibly powerful, incredibly fast, and incredibly well-handling bikes. All my life, I lusted after a Vincent, and each time I wanted one, I couldn't afford it, and each time I could afford it, they climbed too high again.
Oh no.
I was here setting up the museum, and someone came in and said, there was another collection that became available, and Rob asked me to check it out. And in that collection were 7 spectacular bikes, including not one, but 2 Vincents.
Nice.
And they were offered to us. And at the time, I couldn't afford it either, but I wasn't going to miss that opportunity. So we took an equity line out on the house, and
Wow.
we bought all 7 bikes.
The museum was actually established during the pandemic in 2020. What makes the Cycles Classic Cafe Museum collection unique is that every motorcycle and scooter came from friends and customers, like Charles, who is displaying several and some of his most beloved motorcycles at the museum. The oldest motorcycle displayed of the museum is a 1907 Merkel Light though. And another very significant piece is the 1924 Microcar.
But also was a pun because it's near a car. It was supposed to have driven like a car. So very high handlebars, very comfortable seat, enclosed engine, center hub steering, which if you know about motorcycles, Emoda and the other companies raved about this being a new idea in the 1980s. And this is 1921, it has center hub steering. When I'm gone, somebody has to care for them. And unfortunately, the kids today go to car shows and it's no fun to be dragged around a hot asphalt parking lot and be scolded not to touch anything. So what we do is we get them in the cars and we get them to smell them and hear them and drive them and feel them, and we instill the same passion in them so that they'll want to own them. And we're proud to say that we brought a lot of young kids into the hobby. And a lot of my daughter's friends at school had 0 interest in cars, and now as they're growing older, they all call me because they want to buy a vintage car. So it's wonderful that we're like nurturing these kids to have the passion, and that way when we're gone, someone will care for them.
When I said goodbye to Charles, I felt like I had learned so much about the history of old-timers and experienced the real spirit of a collector. And I believe that we connected so well because we both have something essential in common. We both are following our passion, and both have decided to contribute 2 of the most valuable things in the world to it: our time and our hearts. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the journey to Boston and liked Charles' unique stories and his awesome microcar collection as much as I did. If you did, give this video a thumbs up and say hello to Charles in the comments. Next week will already be the last episode of the epic East Coast ride. And for the grand finale, I will take you guys to a very special place. We will visit a stunning peninsula, a colorful and awesome little village, and of course I will show you some more local hideaways and little gems. Tune in next Thursday to join the final ride of the epic East Coast journey.